All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to just thank everybody for making the time today to join us for our Lunch and Learn series. This series is a collaboration between several training programs here, the AD-RICMAR and the Neurosciences T32, as well as the ADRC research education component. The series is designed to highlight our former and present rec scholars' work, and so they can share some of their career trajectory points, tips, encouragements, and anything else with current trainees. And this is also a time for emerging leaders, if they have questions about area like directions to take their research, that they can get feedback from senior faculty. So this is really a series that's designed to support our young career investigators and to showcase some of their highlights. So thank you, Kelsey, very much for being here today.
Thanks, baby. Thank you. Can folks hear me okay online? Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm hoping today is super informal. I was asked to talk a little bit about my career trajectory and kind of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, but please feel free to interrupt or chime in. I'm hoping this is more of a discussion, especially because there have potentially been some changes. So that is, I guess, the first thing. Make sure I'm on the right. There we go. Okay, so how many times have we heard this in our lifetime already? I'm hoping that this little cartoon here is a little hyperbolic, but I just want to acknowledge that, we're living in unprecedented times. A lot's changing and we don't really have the answers. So, what worked for me, hopefully there are pieces that can work for other people too, but feel free to chime in. I'm happy to, try to problem solve navigating where we're at right now. So just a little of my background. My PhD is in clinical psychology with a focus in neuropsychology. So I do both clinical work and research. Graduated in 2016 and then did a 3-year fellowship here at BA and UCSD, kind of a combined fellowship, and then became faculty when I received my VA Career Development Award starting in October of 2019. And then have really only been on soft money for the last 5 or 6 years or so, until this past month when I started on a little bit of hard money for some clinical work that I'm doing. So trying to balance things out a little bit. All right. I thought I would give you the timeline of kind of what major points in my career thus far have looked like since graduating. I do want to acknowledge that the Gators won last night. So, I graduated from UF for my PhD. And as I mentioned before, did 3 years of fellowship, originally 2 years, and then needed a little extra time in order to secure independent funding. So added an extra year. Typically neuropsychology is 2 years of postdoc, but there's a lot of flexibility these days. And so during my postdoc, so I'm just going to highlight some of the grants that really kind of help set me up then for where I am now, and some resources to keep in mind. So early on in my postdoc, I teamed up with a junior faculty member, Emily Edmonds, who was, working on very similar things. And at that time, she had just received an Alzheimer's Association research grant, and she had included me on that as a co-investigator. So that was kind of like my first foray into learning about foundation grants and I guess kind of starting to be on my own rather than only on mentored awards. I thought this grant was really cool. So there was a postdoc version of it through the Alzheimer's Association, and was able to earn one of these awards. It's, I believe still there are 3-year grants. They've upped the amount of money you can receive quite a bit. So definitely something to keep an eye out, these Alzheimer's Association grants. I was also lucky enough at the time to receive, I guess, the prereq version of a grant. It was an ADRC pilot grant here. And that really allowed me to learn the ADRC data. So similar to probably what a lot of you are doing now, learning the data and developing some pilot data from that. So all of that then led into finally I earned a career development award through the VA. So this is very similar to an NIHK award. The difference being so similar, it's 5 years. VA is a little bit more generous. It funds 100% of your effort. So it's nice. It's 100% of your effort covered. And then there is a memorandum of understanding between the VA and UC San Diego. So you can still secure research grants through UCSD for extra funds. So going up to 150% effort. So that's kind of what I've been aiming for in order to maximize my salary these last few years. So it was at that time then received my faculty appointment at UCSD. And then yeah, just kind of continued to plug along, applying for these small grants. So again, I was on an R01 that had already started. They needed someone to fill a role for someone that had left. And so by kind of forming connections through some of the work of the previous grants, I was able to receive some effort as co-I on that R01. And then another mechanism I just want to highlight are these NIH R03 awards. So these are typically 2-year grants. They're really for like discovery pilot grants, but through NIA, and typically I think they're very low amount of dollars. But through NIA, they've provided some opportunities. So it's 100,000 per year, which is a little bit better and makes it worth it to, put in a full grant application. So this was a really nice grant that started, I guess, my foundational work for what will become my R01. At this time, I also then they switched and added the Rec Scholar program, and so was able to become a Rec Scholar. And it was really this R03 and then the Rec grant that really gave me all my pilot data. You can see in the last couple of years, these are shorter grants, and so I wanted to, I guess, continue to maintain 150% effort. And so I applied for an Alzheimer's Association research grant, and then another R03. And then basically all of this is finally leading to an R01. So it took me a while to get there, but we got it. Hopefully it stays. And so then my file's under review, but anticipated promotion to associate this summer. So that's kind of timeline. It was interesting to put this slide together just because, yeah, there have been a lot of steps along the way. Yeah. Yeah, so while I had my career development award, the VA grant, that was, I guess, 100% of my salary through the VA was covered on that grant. But because of my affiliation with UCSD, I was able to submit grants through UCSD in order to achieve, I guess, 50% extra salary. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of glossed over how you went from a postdoc to having a faculty appointment. Can you talk a little bit more about it?
Sure. So in order to have a career development award, you have to, have a faculty position somewhere. So it was kind of low risk for UCSD. I was coming with money to pay myself. They didn't, have to put too much of an investment into me. And so when I was awarded the Career Development Award, it was kind of like automatic that I could then obtain a faculty position. Prior to that, there was like a formal review process. So through UCSD, I did have to give, a job talk and be voted on and things like that. But it's a little bit more of a formality when you're like coming in with your own funding. Okay, so you finally get a faculty appointment, but really kind of along the way, you have to be building your program of research. And, when I think really pragmatically about it, there were kind of three things that stand out to me. And you need to do a lot of publishing, grants at your appropriate level, and then starting to show independence from your mentor. This might not be like, obviously we need to enjoy what we're doing and feel passionate about the work that we're doing. That's like, of course, a given, but just from a pragmatic perspective, I feel like this is what has helped me like progress through the stages. So when we think about how to publish a lot, my like number one rule is to make friends who are also collaborators, collabor friends. And so find a group of people who value the work that you bring, the expertise you have, and then who also make your life easier, who contribute, meaningful work to projects that you're working on together. So you want to have like if you're doing a group project, you want, something that everyone is contributing to. One thing that's been really critical, I guess, in my career is using secondary data when it's available. Of course, this depends on, what's available to you, your area of focus. This may be more difficult on like a basic science level, but there are huge amounts of existing data out there. And it's a lot easier to publish, in a cohort of 2,000 people than trying to collect 100 scans maximum type of thing. And then, realistically finding the balance of impact. So, as much as I would love every paper to, be in Nature, it's just not realistic to expect that given our time constraints and ideas. Sometimes you don't know what's going to be particularly high impact to the field. And so I think finding a balance of those papers where you're contributing, multiple analyses that are really comprehensive to like maybe some more narrowly focused papers that might be a little quicker to write, not necessarily sacrificing quality, but just kind of balancing the scope that you're focusing on. Anyone else have tips that they've learned? We can talk a little bit more about secondary data. So NIH actually encourages the use of secondary data. There are some specific notice of funding opportunities that suggest you use existing data. NIH has like poured immense resources into some of these large studies. And so they would prefer you use what's available, maybe rather than having to expend more resources to do something that might be parallel to what they've already funded. But sometimes it's tough, right? Because lots of people have their hands on these data, they're often publicly available. So it really requires some creativity in order to kind of find unique ways of looking at the data or kind of a unique niche within the data set. So things that have worked for me is, can you apply like an innovative question or, use the data in a new way or look at it with a different method, for example. Or is there something that you can add to the existing data that would kind of be your own? So some people have maybe merged in Medicare data or census tract data to get at neighborhood level factors. Some people with neuroimaging expertise might reprocess the scans using their novel method. So those are just, I guess, a few ways that you can, get creative with the data. For me, it's been, I guess it kind of started as creating a new classification approach using existing neuropsych data. So I was wanting to know if we can use, new metrics of neuropsychological data to identify folks before they are cognitively impaired, kind of at that MCI or dementia phase. And so, along with my colleagues, we've been able to kind of carve out this little niche of using these, traditional neuropsychological scores, but applying them in a new way to kind of improve early detection. And then this was just like a list off the top of my head of data sets that are available. I've had the opportunity to work with a number of them. Everyone has their own challenges and, strengths and weaknesses, certainly. But I definitely encourage folks to kind of explore what is out there, and I'm happy to chat with anyone about any of the ones that I've worked with so far as well. Is anyone using secondary data currently? I know the people in my lab are. Yeah. I guess this is definitely coming from like a more clinically oriented or applied perspective. Are there, yes, I'm less certain if there are data sets available, at a more like basic science level. And yeah, because I feel like that would be incredibly valuable if that's the case. Yeah. All right. So then just kind of thinking about some of these funding opportunities. I mentioned quite a few of these, that I've been able to take advantage of, but foundation grants, there are a lot of different foundations out there who support Alzheimer's and related dementia research. There are also probably I'm sure there are many other foundations like the American Heart Association or other kind of niche areas that support early career grants. These grants are especially nice potentially now, while there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of, NIH funding. Of course, NIH grants, I'm sure, most of you are familiar with these. But I mentioned the R03, R21, a little more high risk, high reward, but maybe a good opportunity to collect some pilot data, and then more of like the training focused grants. So, K01 or K23, and then the K99 to R00 or Kangaroo is kind of that transition grant. And then, yeah, the VA is still offering career development awards. So when you're applying for these grants, these are typically smaller grants, 2 years, maybe 3 years. So it's really important to keep like your research questions focused, 2, maybe 3 focused aims. But I think reviewers start to get wary about like feasibility and things, just given the time constraints of the grants if they become too large. these grants are really nice. They're an opportunity to either collect data for a future R01 if you need the pilot data, and or like publish papers that will support your future R01. And what's nice is that if you're using secondary data, then really most of the budget can go into covering your effort. So it's just something to think about. And then there's often some flexibility. Some grants are more flexible than others, but sometimes foundation grants may be a little more flexible with a no-cost extension or things along those lines. Any questions about this? All right. And then I guess kind of another thing that I've experienced now kind of in this transition from like early career to mid-career is really the need to develop your area, like how you are defined as a scientist. So like what is your scientific identity? What are you, when you're collaborating with other people, what are your unique areas of expertise or unique skill sets that make people want to add you as a co-investigator on a grant or fund your research? So for me, I guess these are like a few of the hats that I might wear depending on what the focus of the grant is. So on some grants, I might be the only neuropsychologist, and that's something that I can bring. On other grants, maybe most people on the team are neuropsychologists, but I have expertise in, working with these large aging cohort studies and modeling the data, so I can bring that focus. So thinking about that and kind of like creating your scientific identity is maybe more important than I had realized, something that I hadn't really thought about as much. And then, you can like decide what you want to be, but then do you have the evidence to back it up? So do you have the training in those areas or publications, grants to support that? And then thinking about, again, kind of that like early career transition, how do you demonstrate that your work is independent from your mentor? That's really critical. It's like one of the, key features as you become maybe like mid-associate level and beyond is for promotion. How are you different from your mentor? And then I guess it kind of goes back to like scientific identity and the hats that you wear, but do you have collaborators who have complementary skills but are not fully overlapping with your area of expertise? So we like to collaborate with our friends and talk about science with people who, have the same background as us, but it's really important to have collaborators who are complementary. All right, independence from your mentor. So again, not necessarily as a postdoc, but should be kind of starting to expand your area of expertise or specific skills. It's critical in order to be promoted from assistant to associate professor. And this can be challenging, especially here at UCSD, where like people are really prominent in the field. It's hard to kind of separate yourself from these incredible people, mentors, and more senior folks that we've been able to work with. So just some ideas for ways to show independence, having some of your grants without your mentor on there. Sometimes things like K or career development awards, like you'll get dinged if your, grad school or postdoc mentor is your primary mentor anyway. So those are a good opportunity to kind of expand your mentorship team. Develop your own outside collaborations, network with people in the field, become a co-I on someone else's grant who's maybe not affiliated with the lab, publish papers with people not at UCSD, and again, without your mentor on it. This is actually something that like specifically like the CAP, like people look at here, like how many papers do you have without your mentor on it? And then, like one way to do this is to develop, kind of a niche area that your mentor hasn't used or published in. So for me, thinking about like my career development award was focused on early cognitive changes associated with diabetes in older veterans. And so my mentor was an expert in early detection, but has never worked with, cardiovascular risk or diabetes. So that was kind of a way to incorporate what my interest is and expand it to learn new skills. Any questions so far? Okay. I did just have like a last few thoughts, mostly just kind of like with where we are right now. So again, kind of diversifying your areas of expertise. Well, a topic or something can be really popular right now in the moment, and a lot of times these are fads and they can change quickly, or are forced to change for different reasons. And so it's important to, I guess, stay nimble, stay flexible, and diversify your areas of expertise. Get your name out there. It's amazing, I guess, like how important reputation in the field is. So, publish, like I mentioned, apply for awards. Even if you're not getting them, people are reviewing them, and it's going to be the same people who review them next time. Like our fields are small. Have a presence at conferences. In the past, social media has been one way to connect with people. I'm not sure it's as effective anymore, but something to consider as well. And then, obviously these are like big decisions about whether to like stay in academia, move into biomedical research, industry, pharmaceutical company. Like there are a lot of options. If you're a clinician, do more clinical work. And so I don't have a lot of advice on that, especially right now, because you have to kind of consider your own situation and I guess risk tolerance when thinking about your next steps. And this was one reason why, I was very excited to have the opportunity to increase my clinical work and have a little bit more stability for that reason. And similarly, diversify your sources of funding. So just like you want to diversify your area of expertise, it is nice when, there's a lot of uncertainty going on to have a foundation grant, for example. So that's pretty much all I prepared. It's also really helpful if you have a fun logo for your lab to put on all their posters at conferences. But yeah.